Well, hello, Jasmine.
Hi, Matt. This is going to be so weird.
We're definitely going to include every awkward moment of this conversation.
We just never talk this formally.
No, we talk a lot.
We talk a lot. So to say okay, the conversation starts now.
Yeah.
And it will end now, that's a weird.
So for people who don't know, we've never had individual offices.
No.
We've always pretty much all worked out of the same room.
Exact same room.
And so there's a lot of conversations that just spark up.
Yeah.
And we don't ever put do not disturb
No.
signs on and ours are kind of right next to each other.
Yeah.
And because so much of what you do connects to what I do and vice versa, there's a lot of just
a lot of content sharing there. Yeah.
And a lot of just overall general conversations. So we talk all the time.
Right.
But now we got cameras pointed at us, and this is going to go on YouTube, and we're going to post the entire conversation.
Okay.
Awkwardness and all.
I am here for that.
So this is a cool thing for me because, I think it's a cool thing for our church. Last week, we got to hear from Christian and Dustin.
Yeah.
And now you enjoy communicating and talking much more than they do.
Oh yeah. So when we talked about that we were going to do this conversation, you said we're going to put a 30-minute timer on the clock, and in my head I was thinking, oh, that's not going to be enough time. And I think audibly Dustin was like, 30 minutes? We got to fill 30 minutes.
Well, last week we talked, and we have a 58-minute and counting down timer right now.
Yep.
But yeah, so we talked for a long time last week, and somehow we're going to do the same again this week, and then we're going to try to shrink it down. But the whole point of these conversations is it's your leadership and their leadership and the leadership of other people on our team that just give legs to the vision.
Yeah.
We're walking through this series, and we're talking about how we go about inspiring people to live and love like Jesus, and we're unpacking the 4 things that we do. And even as I was thinking about us talking today, you have a hand in all 4 things.
Yes.
Because you do a lot around here.
Yes.
And the good thing is, you don't have 3 kids and you're here
no,
6 days a week.
I'm free as a bird.
So Jasmine's official title is Adult Ministries Pastor.
Yes.
And so essentially we have a kids pastor, Sananda, we have a student pastor, and we have an adult ministries pastor. Mm-hmm. And so you pretty much handle all things that are in any way connected to people once they move out of student ministry.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things that fall under your umbrella that we could talk about. But today, because we're talking about the atmosphere piece of our vision, we're going to kind of jump into some really important details around that vision.
Okay.
But I want people to continue to get to know you a little bit too, because every area of our ministry has the fingerprint of the personality of its leader. And although, unlike somebody like Dustin, who is behind the scenes a lot more than you, because you've been weaving into teaching on Sunday mornings, which has been awesome because Jasmine is a phenomenal communicator. But there's a lot of other things about your personality. A lot of people don't know your background. All right, so you're kind of a smorgasbord of things.
Right.
So you went to Southern Wesleyan.
I did.
Where you and your awesome husband Lyle met.
Nope.
No, because y'all grew up in Brevard together.
So we grew up together. I knew him. He's actually younger than me. I remember him when he was shorter than me. And
so what's the age difference?
3 years.
3 years.
Yeah. He's a lucky guy. He told me to talk about him in this interview.
He did.
There you go. So I remember him in youth group. He was shorter than me. I remember, you remember those Heeley skates? He had those Heeley skates and would skate around the halls in church. And he was always a really cool kid to me. And I called him little kid Lyle, little Lyle. That's
funny.
Yeah. So, but we didn't start. That's a really long story. We'll just say we didn't start dating until after I had graduated from college. He was in his senior year of college. So.
Yeah, but what was your degree in from college?
So my first degree from Southern Wesleyan was in business administration. And then because I was at Southern Wesleyan, and it's a small school, I didn't have like an official minor. So I got to take a lot of classes like that I was just interested in. So I took some systematic theology classes, some church administration classes, like just for fun. And then after I graduated from Southern Wesleyan, I went on the mission field for a year in the Czech Republic. I was wondering and kind of felt like God was calling me into missions, like full time, but I didn't know what that looked like. And looking back on it, I think that I was confusing a call to full-time missions to like just a full-time life lived for Christ, no matter what setting I was in. And so I went on the mission field for a year in Czech. While I was there, I worked in a coffee shop. I taught English as a second language. I actually went because they had just started a cheerleading program in the Czech Republic, and I was going to be involved in that. But it took almost the whole year that I was there to even get off the ground. So it wasn't until right at the end that I even got to do like kind of what I went to do. And then after that year, I came back, and because I loved teaching so much, I got a job in the local school system. And then kind of fast forward, career-wise anyway, after we moved here, I got a job as a substitute teacher. And during that interview, the principal who hired me said, "I will hire you as long as you promise to go back to school and get your master's in education." And I was like, well, how do I sign up for that? Because I need this job. And so I did. So I went, I got that job, and then I got my master's in education at UNCG.
So you have a layered background of so many things. So, all right, let's go back.
Okay.
So did you and Lyle start dating after you came back from Czech?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yeah, so, but it was a while after I came back from Czech, almost a year. And I was actually hired to be the worship director on staff at Brevard Wesleyan. And while I was there, that's the church that we grew up in.
Yeah.
And so I worked really closely with his parents. And so I got to hear all these stories about like what Lyle was doing, where he was. And so he was just sort of like always in the peripheral.
Yeah.
And right before his senior year of college, he came and played guitar in our worship band. And he is an incredible musician. Like, I know that church people, like here at Vintage right now, don't get to see that and know that about him. But he is so musically gifted. Like, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, yeah.
And so having him in the worship band, I mean, obviously made it so much better. And I just liked him being there because everybody else was a good bit older than me. And so one day he came and he played guitar. And after church, I asked him if he would want to keep playing. And what I wanted to say was, how interested are you in coming and playing in the worship band every week? But instead, what I said was, so how interested are you in me? I mean, in playing in the band with me. I mean, I'll be there. And it was the most awkward moment. You can call that the Freudian slip or whatever, but
That's
that was
hilarious.
the question that I asked was, how interested are you in me? And then it was like,
So which question did he answer?
Here's what he said. He said, "Oh, I'm very interested."
Way to go, Lyle. Good job, dude. Take advantage of the moment, whether it was meant or not.
Yeah. So from that, like, he was just around a lot more, and it was several months after that before like we started dating.
So 2007 comes, and Ashley and I moved up here to plant a church, and Lyle gives me a phone call because we had connections when I was pastoring in South Carolina, and he was a student at Southern Wesleyan, and you guys had been dating a little while, and for whatever reason, prompting of the Holy Spirit or chance or whatever, he starts finding out about Vintage. Do you remember the first conversation that you had with him about Vintage?
Oh, yeah. So I remember him telling me, because, I mean, it was his senior year of college, and he was a ministry major, and we were dating, and so it's kind of like okay, well, what's sort of down the road, like what's next? And he said that he knew this guy named Matt Smith that he'd worked with at Welcome Wesleyan. He'd been involved in
He played in the band for us.
Yeah, he played in the band with y'all.
Yeah.
And he said, and he's getting ready to go, like, to plant a church in Greensboro, and like I'm really interested in maybe like going. And then I think so. Then he had talked to you, and then he came back and he said, like, we hadn't been dating all that long, and he said, like, I think that's really what I want to do. He said, because I don't want to go into like a traditional church setting and have to fight everything. He was like, this is an opportunity like to start something from scratch. And that was really appealing to him. And he was like, but like, it was kind of a both and. It was like I need you to know where I think I'm going, but also I want you to be on board with this. And so when he like shared it with me, I was like, oh, well, that's kind of like missions. And so it sparked something in me. I didn't know anybody I didn't know you, and I didn't know anybody who was here. We don't have any family here, nothing. But there was something just really appealing about that. And so I think you guys met a couple of times first, and then he and I both came, and we went to your house. And I think we met Jason and Jenny that night, and maybe a couple other people, but it might have been just Jason and Jenny.
Yeah.
And just hearing you talk, it's so funny because it's basically the same thing that you share in Vintage 101 or what you share in Live Love. Like I heard more than 12 years ago in your living room, and there was just something there that was like, I love this. And I loved church. Like I grew up in church, and there was never any, like I don't have a bad taste in my mouth at all about church.
Yeah.
But what you said was like, as good as church experience has been for me, I've never seen anything like that. And like, I want to do that. I want to be part of this. And so Lyle and I kept dating, and we kept coming to Greensboro, like any opportunity that we had, or, whenever something was going on. And we got married. You did part of our wedding. And yeah.
Because y'all got married in 2008.
Yep, 2008.
Because Aiden and Leah were tiny.
Teeny tiny. Yeah.
Man, we could keep talking into that story because there's just, Christian and Dustin have been here for a really long time, but you and Lyle and a few others have been from the beginning, which is super rare. I don't think people realize how rare it is for those original core people not only to still be here, but to play a significant role. And even so that first couple years, did you ever dream or think that you would be playing as significant as a role in our church as you do now?
No. You say it a lot. You say, when people ask, is this what I thought it would be? Like, is this what Vintage would be? Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I didn't have this in mind, I knew that we moved here for this reason. And there was a lot, in the beginning where the only model of youth pastor, worship pastor, even lead pastor that we had ever seen was somebody who stayed for 5 or 6 years, and then God called them somewhere else, whatever. And so in the beginning, it had nothing to do with what we were experiencing here at Vintage, but there was part of me that was like, this will be short-lived. Because that's what I thought every pastoral position was.
Right.
Every pastor's kid, there's like, we moved around from church to church to church. And so I just thought, like, that's just going to be the story.
Yeah.
And there have been multiple points in our time here, like when, we've moved from house to house, or, there's been transitions in jobs that it's been like, is it time? And never, not one time has it been like, I really think we need to go, but I feel obligated to stay. It's been like, here's an out, here's a door, and it would make absolute sense to take the exit ramp. But at no point has it been like that's the way that God was directing us. And so in the beginning of being here, Lyle was the worship pastor, and I led worship with him. And that's what I did here. And I don't say only what I did, like that it's not significant. I was a worship leader for a long time. I was also one of our small group leaders. I was one of our first small group leaders. You and
And-
Ashley were in
in
our
y'all's
small
apartment
group.
in Greensboro.
Yeah, and that's what I did. And I mean, I was teaching, and so I just thought, like, Lyle's gonna have his church job. I'm gonna have my teaching job, and that's the way that this is gonna be. I mean, and that's how you and Ashley were. You know, she was teaching, and you were here, and
Yeah.
it's like this. That's just what it'll be. And but I've always had a draw to church work, church ministry, church life. Like, there's something about participating in the body, like, as it's functioned here, like in a building, as an organization. Like, there's always something that's really appealing about that. And I think it's because I have had such a good church experience my whole life. Like, I want to make sure that other people have such a good church experience. Like, I don't want to be the church that leaves a bad taste in somebody's mouth. I mean, and there's so much I can't control within somebody's narrative, but like what I can, I want to make sure that, like, our church represents the church that Christ established as best as it absolutely can. And so, no, to be very short, no, I never imagined that I would never preach. I mean, I've always liked to talk. This is a very natural thing for me, and I've always liked to teach. But I never saw, growing up, I grew up in a Baptist church, and then even like in a Wesleyan church that affirms women in ministry, even like pastoral ministry. I had never seen it.
Yeah.
I had never seen a woman preach from the platform. Now, I had seen women come in and sing, and I did that forever. And I thought that basically, like, this is the ceiling for women, and for whatever reason. And so
That's a whole nother conversation.
Oh yeah, we could definitely go down that one. But I had never seen it, and so no, I never dreamed that this is the role that I would play here at Vintage.
Yeah. Yeah. As I'm sitting here thinking, I'm thinking, man, we could just keep talking about your story and the evolution of your involvement and leadership in our church, to a point where there was a time when there was a position thought of you coming in, being an admin assistant, and the tension that was between us when we didn't pursue
totally
that.
Fine.
And but to fast forward and to watch over the last couple of years as God has just worked in your life and made it really clear. And that's the thing about everybody on our team. It's not like all of a sudden one day I come up and said, oh, there's Jasmine, she could do this. Like, every one of our leaders, all of us have just looked and saying, wow, God's doing something in them and giving them influence and giving them gifts, and we just need to, like, foster it and funnel it and support it and grow it. And I think that's kind of, even as I've thought about our conversation, like, I'm trying to think, like, how did we get to the place that Jasmine is now? And I'm not trying to blow smoke or make your head
make my head any bigger than it already is.
But just to see how much I depend and we depend on your gifts to keep our church in the pivotal role that you play. And again, there's so many things that you do, but one of the things that has really been put in your hands to develop is our groups ministry.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I'm thinking about, even as you're talking, is you talk about leading a small group, but our church was a small group.
Yes.
When we're not a church with groups, we are a church of groups, because for the first 2 years of this church, it was a group, because there were 12 of us in a living room
Right.
for the longest time, and it basically was just a small group that ballooned into a big group. But the evolution of even groups in our church, because you've seen every iteration of it, but now you get to be kind of the architect of creating an atmosphere that provides lifelong, life-giving relationships that people can have care and accountability in.
Right.
So let's unpack that for a little bit,
Yeah.
because we don't do groups like every church does.
Nope.
And we don't do groups in a way that everybody necessarily prefers.
Sure.
But let's talk about kind of why we're doing them the way we're doing them, especially at this point.
Right. So, you said that I've seen every iteration. of life groups. I've seen, and they've not always been called life groups either.
Yeah.
You know, they were called small groups, and then they were called get fed groups, and then I think it was life groups after that.
Yeah.
And because I've seen every iteration and participated in them, and whether it was as a member or as a leader, I've seen the best pieces, the pieces that work. And so a lot of the design of life groups right now, you know, you said like I'm kind of the architect behind it. And it's because like I've seen the structural pieces that have to be in place in order for them to work well. Mm-hmm. And then I can also advise on those places, like these are some pitfalls you need to watch out for. This is where I've seen life groups like spiral down the drain. This is like especially that life-giving piece, like that we want life-giving, lifelong relationships. Like that's an acknowledgement to the reality, like that some things are not life-giving. Not every relationship is life-giving. And so how can we create that environment, that atmosphere where people can, like that fosters those life-giving relationships? Like what are some kind of guardrails that we need to have in place to make sure that when you leave your life group or you leave your community group, you come back to your space, whether that's, you know, as a wife, as a husband, as a child, as a parent, as a brother, a sister, a coworker, you come back into that space better than when you left it because you participated in that group.
Yeah.
So being able to see like the evolution of all the groups has brought us to where we are. And it has also helped me not to hold on to the way that we do things right now, because I acknowledge, like, I've seen it work a lot of ways. And I know that the way that we do it right now works, but I also know it probably won't work forever. So it's always just sort of keeping a pulse on what things need to shift, what things need to change in order for, you know, 2 years down the road, 10 years down the road, that we're not in a place where it's like, wow, life groups are really not working. Like that we're continually evolving and just making those minor adjustments so that it continues to work and provide that atmosphere that we want our people to have.
Yeah. I think a lot of times when people think of our core value of innovative environments, they naturally think of what happens in this room on Sundays. But innovation is necessary in all facets of our ministry.
Absolutely.
Because as you know, the vision is fluid, and even I think we'll always do the 4 things that we're unpacking in this series. Yep. But what those 4 things look like are constantly changing. Right. And you said something that's really important. You know, ultimately, life groups is about relationships because it's in and through intentional relationships that we find and grow in Jesus.
Yes.
And I've said, I think before, relationships aren't good for your faith. The right relationships are good for your faith. And that's what we're trying to do, is how do we create an environment? And so over the last couple years, life groups have changed in that span of time as much as they ever have.
Right.
Even to the different levels of groups that we're offering and why, and the way that they're structured.
Right.
And I don't think people get to hear enough, like, why we do groups. So let's talk about like life groups, because we do life groups and community groups, and unpack the 2 levels of groups and why we have 2 different levels.
Okay, so let's talk about community groups first. So community groups are our larger group environment. We only have 1 community group for women, 1 community group for men, 1 community group for our older adults over 50 called Second Half. And the reason that we do this is because we know that when you come into Vintage, you want to connect. Like we do everything that we can to make a big church feel like a small church. You can come from a church where, you know, there's 150 people and you basically know everybody in it. Well, that's just not possible here. And even just with multiple gatherings, you might not ever know somebody who's in that 7 o'clock gathering or who's in that, you know, what's the other times we do? 9/11. Thank you.
That changes all the time too. So.
Yeah, that we want to provide a space like where you can know people. And so community groups are great because they are twice a month. So the time commitment is low. And also you aren't bought in, or you're not committed to coming every single time. You can come as your schedule and preference allows. And that is sort of a revolving door. there are some people who go to community group every single time. Like that's their committed time.
Yeah.
And that's where they're really growing those relationships. But there's also people who come once a month, or who come once a quarter, or who come one time. And it's a great sort of low risk environment.
Even in location.
Even it's here.
Yeah.
You don't have to go to somebody's house,
right.
because it can be really scary to come to a new church and then you want to meet some new people and you have to go to somebody's house to do it. Like that's so many steps right there before you can get into any kind of relationship or an environment where you can start a relationship. So our community groups meet here. Our second half community group meets at Sir Pizza, which is also neutral turf with delicious food. So that's never a bad thing.
Yeah.
So our community groups are led by great leaders, and there's always biblical content and an opportunity for you to sort of be in smaller groups and have those discussions. So that's our community group piece. It's a really, I don't want to say entry level in like a bad way.
No.
Because the depth of content and connection is significant,
right?
But it's not that committed requirement that we have for life groups.
Yeah.
So community groups serve as a really good way to get involved, especially when you first get here, or if you're looking for just sort of a lower commitment. Maybe you have a weird work schedule. Community groups are a great way to build relationships.
Yeah, but we also feel a need for like a kind of a next layer.
Yeah.
That we call life groups. So those community groups are those spaces they run pretty much throughout the year, other than breaks for like holidays and things like that. So no matter when you come to our church, you have an opportunity, as opposed to life groups when we do semesters and they're smaller and that kind of stuff. So life groups, they're capped at a certain number and they run for a certain length, and there's a certain kind of content that we want. And for a lot of people are like, oh man, that feels like a lot of control.
Yeah.
But I want people to hear your heart behind why we make those decisions, why we ask you to meet weekly, why we only have 12, why once they're closed, why we want to somewhat encourage the content of the conversation.
Sure.
So start unpacking that.
All right, so like I said, because I've seen so many iterations of groups, I have seen where those pitfalls are. And so one of the things that I've seen as a roadblock or a hurdle to lifelong, life-giving relationships is when there are too many people in the room. Because when you are in a group, really outside of that 12 people, it's just as easy to hide in a group of 20 as it is in this room. You know, we're saying like get out of a row and get into a circle. And for a circle to be effective, it cannot be this huge, wide circle. It has to be small, like where you can lean in and you can have conversation. And, you know, we're talking about groups that are meeting for an hour and a half. And so, you know, you have 12 people. And if everybody has time that they can share and be heard, when you get much beyond that, you're going to have, you know, those few people who never say anything and can get away with it.
That's good.
So that 12 is there, you know, partly for that reason, also because we see that's what Jesus modeled. He had 12 disciples, and he was number 13. So we're going to say we're just going to go with 12. Seems like a good cap. But that was a good amount of people. That was the amount of people that he personally could pour into, and who could personally like help one another out. But even out of that, he still had his 3 that were his inner circle. So we see that small group work. And now there were, you know, the 72 and then the thousands who followed.
Right.
But he knew, like, my time on earth is limited. And I need to be very intentional in these relationships that I build. I need to be intentional in the time that I spend with them, so that number is limited. We like for there to be no less than 6, ideally, because because life happens. If you have 6 people, 2 can't come, obviously you only have 4 people. So we do say like we'd like for it to be at least 6, but that 12 people lets more conversation happen. It gives more opportunity for every person to be able to speak, to contribute, and to share. And when you get outside, like I've been in groups of of 20 women, and you come to that prayer time at the end, and you share prayer requests, and it would take an hour. Like, we would have already gone through just to get through that, because you have somebody share, like, this is something that's on my heart, and I'm going through this, and my kid's struggling with this, and so you spend time talking about that thing. Well, by the time that you get around to all 20 people's prayer requests, and then you pray, I mean, you've been there for 3 hours, and you're exhausted, and your husband's mad when you get home because where have you been?
Yeah.
That's not a personal anecdote there, but
yeah.
So that's one reason that we keep it at 12. Some of the other pitfalls that I've seen are like the revolving door that I referred to. I've been in groups where you sort of start gaining, you gain momentum. It takes a little while for that trust to be built. You start sharing, and you always have those couple in the group who it just takes them a little bit longer. They're a little more guarded and not sure, like, is this a safe space for me to share? And they start to open up, and then the next week, a new person comes. And all of a sudden, like, I can't talk. I don't know this person. I don't know if this person is going to leave this group and share about what I'm getting ready to share about. I don't know if I'm going to be fodder for gossip around the water cooler at their work the next day. I don't know. I mean, and we'd like to think that everybody who came to a life group has great intentions, but we want to make sure that those relationships can be built, because relationships are built on trust. And if you don't have space that's guarded, it's very, very difficult to build that trust.
That's so good. I think, because those two things, why 12 and why can't, if I meet a coworker in the middle of the semester, just bring them to my house or my group.
Right.
We say that an atmosphere where people can build lifelong, life-giving relationships for care and accountability.
Right.
Accountability can't happen if transparency is absent.
Absolutely.
And transparency is the byproduct of trust.
Yes.
And what you're saying is so true, is it takes time to build trust. And okay, I built trust with these 5 or 6, 7 people, and then all of a sudden this new person comes in, and just when I was about to have that breakthrough, there's a new face that I don't yet trust. Mm-hmm. And the next thing you know, I've got to start all over again with that. And
right.
Yeah, we want this to be a space where you can be vulnerable and transparent. And seen, and keeping it on that small. And I think when people say, why 12? Jesus. I mean, that's a pretty good, that's a pretty good, I think you and I know that Jesus didn't do anything like randomly.
Right.
I think Jesus was trying to say something to us that, hey guys, you cannot build intentional relationships to the level that you need to grow them into people who are following me faithfully beyond this number. And it's just, it's so good. When you say this, I'm like, I don't understand why people don't get it, because it's so true.
Well, and with the whole semester deal, so how that works is people sign up at the beginning of the semester. They stay for one semester. The groups meet every week, or at least every other week, depending on the length of the semester. Sometimes like this current semester, we say you have to meet every week because it was a shorter semester. And then we have off ramps. We end at in December, and then we'll start again in January. And that's a great on and off ramp for people. Maybe it was this group, I thought it was going to be a good fit, and it wasn't. And I need a way to exit without it feeling like I'm quitting the group.
Yeah.
Or even for our leaders, we have amazing life group leaders, and we always want to honor them, and we never want to assume that because they signed on for a semester that they've signed on for life. And so that semester also gives structure and ways for us to onboard and offboard both members and life group leaders. And a lot of people do come at us with the whole, but I want to bring my coworker, or this girl just moved here and she's coming to our church and I think she'd be a great fit for our life group. Well, yeah, but just because she can't be in your life group doesn't mean she can't be your friend. Doesn't mean that you can't go to coffee with her or say, hey, people in my life group, I've got this friend that I really want her to get connected, but I know that this isn't the best space to bring a new person into, but could we all go have dinner together? Could we all have coffee together? Could we hang out one Saturday? Bring her, you can bring her into that community without it necessarily disrupting that time that you've set aside for that group.
I think that's also important for people to understand when we try to encourage people to multiply as groups.
Yes.
Because there's people that we were in our life group together this semester, and we clicked and we gelled, and we can't imagine being together. But there's potential that we see in some of those people and multiplying those groups and help people understand, okay, just because maybe next semester you are in the same life group does not mean y'all stop being friends.
Right.
Doesn't mean y'all stop being intentional with each other. It means you take that beauty that you created together and you share it with other people. And yeah, y'all can still connect and be together and go to dinner and have fun and text and Marco Polo to each other. And I think because multiplication is our goal.
Right.
Is to get groups to birth new groups.
Well, and because the people who are going to best lead another group are people who have experienced that lifelong, life-giving like relationships within that atmosphere.
Yeah.
And they want to provide it for someone else. It is a complete act of selflessness. It's saying, like, I want to stay in this group. I love this group. I don't want this group to break up. I want to stay in it, but I know that there are other people who need to be in a circle, and I know what it feels like to be in a circle.
Yes.
And so it's really an act of inclusivity. And so our whole model is multiplication. And in a lot of ways, and I've said this to some of our life group leaders recently who have such good life groups, where it can feel like we're punishing them for doing exactly what we've asked them to do. Because that's what it feels like. Is you're telling me that I can't be with my friends anymore once a week, but I've done exactly what you've told me. So I get that tension, and I feel that too.
Yeah.
But I also know that there are so many groups or so many people who need to be in a group, and so we want people who have experienced that intentional relationship.
Yes.
To open the door,
Yeah.
their actual literal doors of
Right.
their home, and make another circle.
That's good. So let's talk about content within the groups.
Okay.
Because there's been a huge evolution to that.
Yes.
And a really recent kind of thing that I think you and I both have had on our heart. Because we have people all the time, and we used to kind of somewhat allow it. People who kind of have their own little niche thing they want to do. But just here recently, we've made a shift to really wanting all of our life groups to center themselves around what we feel like our pastors are teaching from this platform on the weekend. Mm-hmm. And there's a reason for that.
Yeah.
And I think people need to like understand that. Because a lot of people are feeling like, man, I want to do a book study. And if you want to do a book study, do a book study. It just won't be a vintage life group.
Right.
That there's a reason why, and I want you to unpack that a little bit.
So it's really multi-layered. Some of it comes out of, like I said before, things that I've seen not work. But also a lot of it points back to something that you said last week when you said every Sunday we are trying to take people to some place.
Right.
There's something, there is some truth, there is something that God wants for our church to experience, for us to unpack, for us to really dive into. And I think for so long, we would sit in this room and we would hear an amazing message. We would cry, we would go pray, we would do all the things, and then you would walk out of the door and you would forget what you had to do to really apply what was spoken from the platform, what we experienced. And there are different ways that we're trying to address that right now. But if we believe, and I really do, because I speak, I believe that God is telling our church something through our pastors, through the message that's being preached here. And so why would we say that it's only a message for Sunday?
Yeah.
Like, that's our message for our whole life. And if we also believe that where our faith is going to grow best and grow deepest is in the context of community, why in the world would we not bring those two things together to say, okay, we are going to use this piece of community, these life groups, to help us unpack and apply the message that God is trying to teach from this platform. And because we've seen it and we've said it forever, God, why do I say the things that I say from this platform when I see people go and do the actual opposite thing that I just preached about? That is such a frustrating thing.
It's different when you start preaching it.
It's really different. It's like, I know that I said these words.
Yeah.
And then I saw that person in church, and now I see the whole opposite thing that I just said. And that, that is just from, and maybe that person, while they were in this room, they got it. They understood. But they didn't have the opportunity to figure out, how does this go from here into my Monday life?
Yeah.
How do I take this, and how does it change the way that I live where I work,
Yeah.
the way that I live in my home? And we wanted life groups to be that avenue. And that's why, and this is kind of a side tangent, like that's why our leaders, we don't want them to be teachers. We want our leaders to be facilitators.
That's good.
Because we have a lot of people who are capable of teaching. They know a lot about Jesus, but they don't do a good job of necessarily reflecting him or helping us learn how to be like him. And so we really, when we're looking for life group leaders, we're looking for those people who can facilitate conversations to help people to grow deeper in their faith, for people to figure it out in their own life.
Right.
And so our life groups this semester, for the very first time, they're not doing book studies. They're not getting to choose whatever they want to study. And it's not because of control. It's about unity. We have enough things that are pulling at our
Say that again, because I think people need to hear that. It's not about control.
It's not about control. It's about unity.
Yeah.
God is trying to unify his church around a certain message, around, and I don't just mean like the one message that we hear on Sunday, but he's trying to center and unify his church around the gospel. And if every week we believe that we are preaching the gospel, the good news here on this platform, then we need to unify around that at every chance that we get.
Yeah, that's so good. As you're talking, I'm thinking about the way I grew up, and one of the things that was in my heart when we started Vintage. I grew up going to Sunday school, going to preaching, going to Sunday night, going to Wednesday night. And typically that meant I got 3 different principles that I had to somehow chew on.
Right.
And I think it led to discipleship was more about the abundance of information instead of the intention of application.
Yes.
And that's why we've shifted to this is, okay, let's, like you said, we believe that what God is teaching in this room, that ultimately our pastors have that responsibility to teach truth. And we want to leverage that life group atmosphere to be that space where conversation happens for the application of that truth. I don't know why we didn't shift to this years ago.
I know. And I mean, I've had people ask.
And we've had groups that have been doing it.
Yes, we've had groups that have been doing it. And just so everybody knows, what we provide for all of our life group leaders is a sermon discussion guide. So every Sunday, like live in real time, we are taking notes, and we have an incredible team of basically content builders who are listening to what you're preaching or what I'm preaching or whoever's on this platform, and they are synthesizing all of that information and breaking it down into really great questions and really great ways for your life group to start to really apply break down and then apply what we talk about here each weekend. And so we're not asking our life group leaders to come up with their own content. We're saying we're going to provide this for you, and then your job as a facilitator is to know your group well enough to be able to steer this conversation. And we're going to give you the questions, and you have the freedom to work within them.
Yeah.
And we've seen for so long life groups who do a book study. Well, you have people who sign up to be in this life group, and they think, I'll have time to read this book. But listen, I have never been in a life group, never, not one time, where 1 week everybody came and had read.
Everybody.
Yeah. Never.
That's life.
It's life.
And that's not bashing on people. It's just the reality of the situation.
That's right. And if there's one thing that we want people to be reading, it's the Bible.
Say that again.
If there's one thing that we want people to be reading, it's the Bible.
I think that's one thing as people think of is, I don't like to read, but I'll read all these great I won't call them self-help, these spiritual books that have value.
Absolutely, they have
but
value.
If you said, okay, I have a limited amount of time, and I can read this phenomenal book by this great Christian author, or I can read the Bible. As your pastor, I'm going to say it's an easy choice. Read the Bible.
Your Bible. Because a lot of times those books become substitutes for the Word of God.
They're meant to be supplements.
They're meant to be supplements. If you're reading a devotional, this is a totally different soapbox maybe. If you're reading a devotional or your life group's reading a book and it doesn't point you back to the Word of God, it doesn't make you want to go deeper into your actual Bible.
It's good.
You don't need to be reading it right now. Like
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And listen, I've read a lot.
You're a big reader.
I am a big reader.
Yeah.
I have a lot of books.
So nobody on this stage is not a champion of reading and books.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
But the books that I choose to read are the books that I choose to read on my own.
Yeah.
And I don't choose to read them as a supplement or as a substitute
right.
to the Bible. Yeah. And a lot of times I'll read them side by side.
Yeah.
But I never, if I only have time for one, it's going to be God's Word every single time. Yeah. And so why would we create an atmosphere where we're asking you, who you already don't like to read a book that wasn't written by God, and that's what your life group talk is going to be about? Because with these sermon discussion guides that we give, we also give basically the main scripture that we share from here Sunday. And then that life group, we've even invited them to say, because you should be reading the Bible every day. Why don't y'all read the same thing every day? Go through 1 Corinthians, go through Philippians and Colossians, and read something every single day that's the same.
Yeah.
Talk about it. Hold each other accountable in it. See how God is transforming your life through reading His Word and through talking about what God is teaching us here on Sunday mornings.
There's two more things that I kind of want us to hit on, and this conversation is going to be lengthy, but that's okay. Because I think a lot of people, one reason why we don't have as many life groups is because we don't have as many people who are willing to lead because they're intimidated.
Yeah.
But I hope that people are hearing that we don't need you to be biblical scholars.
Nope.
We don't even need you to be phenomenal teachers. What we need for you to be able to do, and I hope that people have a passion to do this, is to sit down with a group of people and have a discussion about the sermon you just heard from a pastor that I hope that you trust, or you wouldn't be at our church. Have a discussion on how to apply what you just heard to your life. How to process. Man, one of our pastors just preached this message, and I said amen a lot in the room. But now I have to figure out, how does this affect me as a father, as a husband, as a person in the world?
Right. Which
also leads me to the second thing that I think people feel like sometimes when they hear this. Well, it's robbing our group of its identity and individuality. Mm-hmm. But imagine that discussion in those groups will be as unique and individual as the dynamic of the people making up that group.
Absolutely. It in no way undermines a group's uniqueness or individuality. The same question that is asked in all of our life groups is going to lead to a different discussion because of the people who are sitting in that circle. So, you might have a group of, let's say, single young women. That conversation is going to sound very different than our married men's life groups. Like, it's just it will be a different discussion, and the uniqueness comes from the people who are sitting in the circle, not the book that you're reading.
Yeah. It's just like people could all be reading the same book, but the dynamics of that conversation
Absolutely.
is so dependent on your stage of life and where you are. So in no way does this, to me, in any way strip groups of their individual personalities and that kind of thing.
Right.
And I love this format. I love the idea of we create this community group realm, a layer of groups. So it's the first chance for people to get out of these rows and into the safest circle in a neutral place with minimal commitment. People just aren't ready to make that leap yet. And I also love that we create this really intense layer that models what Jesus gave us, gives people an opportunity to really soak in what we're teaching in our weekend worship gatherings. But ultimately, it's helping people be reminded of this. The body is community. Mm-hmm. And we need relationships. The very first time that God said something wasn't good was when he noticed that Adam was alone. And that wasn't just about marriage. That was just about we're created for community. And I've always believed that what happens in this room may get people here, but it's relationships that cause people to stay.
Yep.
I think take it all the way back to your story. The reason why that you and Lyle have stayed here is, there's a love and a passion for our church and what we do. But I think you would agree that the relationships that have been created you said you moved here with no family. You didn't know anybody in this area, but now you do have family.
Yeah.
And there's relationships that you have built over these years that have been vital to your own spiritual life.
Oh, absolutely. And it's the people who were in that very first life group that we hosted in our apartment, that every time that we've thought, like, is it time? Like, do we need to peace out? Like, Sananda and Brad McGee come to mind. I cannot imagine our life without Sananda and Brad. Addie has our kids right now as we speak, and Anna and Ruby. Like, I can't imagine that. I can't imagine our life without you and Ashley and Aiden and Leah. Like, your parents. We have family here, even though, our blood family is hours away. Like, it would kill us to leave our people. And yeah, you're absolutely right. Like, I love our church, and I think Vintage Church has something that, no, it's not, I think I know because I experience it. This church has something that is really special.
Yeah.
And you know it when you experience it. And gosh, life groups and community groups, like, that's where you start. Like, you experience this room, and it is different, where it's like, like, worship is different, and this preacher's different, and there's a woman preaching, and that's real different. That's different. But really, where I have felt the most difference is in those relationships. Like, I grew up in traditional churches, and I can remember a friend of mine coming and saying, like, yeah, we were at the baseball game, and so-and-so's mom was actually talking about you. And I was like, somebody's mom was talking? I was in high school. But, like, that... And I'm not saying, like, I didn't participate in it too, but that gossip, that, like, we're nice to each other's faces, and then then we go to our other spaces and we're not so nice anymore. I don't feel that here. Like, for the first time, and I shared this at Women's Weekend a couple weeks ago. For the first time, when I, like, at Vintage with the women here, when I leave the room, I never wonder, are they talking about me? Like, are they waiting for me to get up so they can just keep talking about me?
Wow.
Not because I'm anything special to talk about,
Right.
but, like, I'm never insecure in those relationships, and it's because the other conversations that I have with women are never about other women. Like, I'm talking about, like, our elders, our women who are elders. I'm talking about our women who are key leaders here. Our conversations are never about other people. Our conversations are about, like, what's going on in our lives. I have more spiritual conversations with people in our church than I ever did with other church experiences before. Like, that's where I have experienced this is something different.
Yeah.
The whole, like, early church in Acts chapter 2 that we see, that they were, going from house to house, like, breaking bread, and they met together every day. Do you know what it takes to be with somebody every day? They had to like being around each other. They had to enjoy one another's company in order to make that work. And so, like, joining a life group for the first time, I'm not saying is going to be, like, fireworks for every single person. It's not. But it's that first admission of, I need people in my life. It's that first step of saying, like, I think I need something more than just sitting in church and reading my Bible by myself at home. Like, I need people. And there's going to be people that you start to connect to, that you start to build those relationships with, that you enjoy being around every single day. And you Marco Polo every single day, or you text message, or you Vox, or you call each other. That's, like, we want to make sure that you have that opportunity. And that's why we provide these atmospheres. Because church is about more than coming in and out of this building on Sunday. And
Yeah.
I think communities where that really happens.
You know, we've said, especially throughout the season that we've been in, the church isn't the building, it's the people.
Yeah.
But there's a part of that statement really rings hollow in people's hearts if all they've done for years is sit in the building.
Yep.
If all you've ever done is sit in rows and never had the courage to step into a circle when the rows are taken from you, then your church experience really takes a hit.
Yep.
And I think in this season, more than any, we've seen how important it is that relationships are a core part of our spiritual journey. And you don't get the relationships that you need most by simply sitting in rows. You have to have the courage to step out and sit in circles. And even as we're talking, I'm thinking the most important life group in our church is our staff. And our staff is a life group.
Yep.
It's a small group of us that we literally do life together, and we genuinely like each other.
Yeah.
So much so that, you know, we have conversations that are not about work, and we invest in each other. I mean, it's a huge part of who we are. And if we are going to inspire people to live and love like Jesus, they can't just come and have the experience of the gathering.
Yep.
They have to be willing to get out of the rows of the gathering and into the circles of a group so that they can have the relationships to propel them forward. And I'm grateful that you're the one giving legs to that part of our vision.
Thanks.
Appreciate you.
Appreciate you.